So, karibu sana. Ningependa kujua ambao hawasikii Kiingereza kwanza ili tujue lugha tunayotumia. It's very okay, don't worry. I'd love to know those who do not understand Swahili, if you're here. Yeah, so we are comfortable, we can use both languages. We are all conversant with both. So thank you so much for coming. And today is a very special day. We're going to talk about corporate governance failures. Why corporate governance fails. It's one of the very special, important subjects if you're running a business or any other organization. For the very short time I've been into business, I've learned that a lot of companies fail, or a lot of businesses get stagnant and not grow just because of how they've structured themselves. Some other they go into fight and tear apart the business just because of the governance of their businesses. So today we have our dear sister, Salome Msimbe, who is actually one of the partners in PwC, and she's been into the industry for over 15 years in auditing, consultancy of various business. So she's seen a lot, which I believe she's gonna give to us today a portion of a big chunk of knowledge she's accumulated in the past 15 years. Yeah, so you're going to hear a summary of experience of 15 years just in 1 hour. If you were to read books, you have to go through that period of time. Or if you are supposed to work, you have to go through that period of time. But today is summarized and compressed for you today. Hallelujah. So what a privilege. It's not very easy to get people of such caliber to speak to us, trust me. But through the platform the church has created, we have that opportunity to tap into these great men and women of God and share with us openly and freely. Hallelujah. Can we give a clap to God for that? Can we also clap for the church leadership for putting up this program for us? Yeah, so after her presentation, we're going to have a time for Q&A, question and answer, and discussions that every one of us will have an opportunity to take part through questions, through the sharing of whatever we have. So, Ben, thank you so much. And may we put our hands together as I welcome our dear sister Salome Msimbe to come for a presentation. And for those who are following us online through YouTube, I welcome you as well to follow through the program. Karim.
Praise Jesus, brothers and sisters. Amen. I think I don't have to introduce myself. Prosper has done a very good job, isn't it? Okay, so I think I'm not going to share just my experience, but for me, I say I'll facilitate the discussion. This is a professional gathering, and we have professionals here, we have business, owners here, we have business people, we have students who are also learning corporate governance. So we are all going to share our practical experiences as well as challenges. And I'm glad that we're talking about corporate governance after we went through, the last session, I had a privilege of being the panelist, and our director, Prosper, shared with us the challenges that business faces, in the first 5 years. So if you look at the challenges, we didn't talk about, pretty much we also touched corporate governance in some of those challenges. But if you ask me, corporate governance is one of the fundamental challenges that business faces, regardless of their sizes. and even the cycle in their businesses. So today, we are going to talk about corporate governance. The term governance is very broad, and there are so many types of governance. But we have narrowed down to corporate, because when it comes to business organizations, then you use the word, corporate governance. I'm going to use a PowerPoint presentation, and I hope it works. Do you see anything? The slides are not moving. Okay. Just to orient ourselves in terms of the contents, we're going to go through introduction, but again, we're going to see some of the corporate governance failures, and this is pretty much public information. Then we are going to now answer $1 million question, why corporate governance fails, after we've gone through some examples, and then we are going to discuss or see the lessons that have actually been learned. So when you see a company like Coca-Cola, for example, that company has been in business for about a century and 2 decades. For companies such as that, you really need to appraise the corporate governance, because you have had and we have seen companies that have actually been in business for 20 years, 2 decades, but they just fell in a matter of seconds. I'm not quite sure how many of you have heard about Enron, the mother of corporate governance failure. Enron, yes, I can see someone is nodding his head here. So Enron, much as yes, it was one of the American largest company. In fact, it was one of the top 10 companies in America and the largest energy company. But it fell just happened in a span of about a year. And why? Because of corporate governance. Let's move the slides again. All right. So when you hear any headlines about company, a scandal, corruption, be sure that the word corporate governance would follow. Mambo ya kiutawala yatafuata tu baada ya hiyo scandal, In terms of evolution, why corporate governance? During industrial era, about 18th century, that's when industrial era started. So that's when, corporations or companies began. But during that era, unethical matters started. People became so greedy, the executive, the senior management. You found that they got rich, but the owners of business were not that rich. So clearly, some laws were needed at that point. But when you talk about 21st century that we're in, corporate governance goes beyond protecting shareholders' interest. Corporate governance nowadays represent even public interest. For some of us, you're not new to the word ESG. Some of those that are not, corporations, environmental, social, governance issues. So it's not about the owners, Prosper and your co-founder, but it's about the environment, it's about the social, sustainability, and the governance together. So there are quite a number of stakeholders when you talk about governance. I've tried to show there. There are internal governance mechanism as well as external. So when you talk about external, see the example of Tanzania. The capital market, the likes of CMSA, that falls under external corporate governance. In a way, they also provide governance to especially the public corporations. But not only that, when you talk about BOT, for example, that also provides governance, oversees the banking and the financial services sector. From an insurance perspective, there is TIRA, Tanzania Insurance Regulatory Authority, so that will also fall under external governance mechanism. But internally, many of us think it's just the board of directors. Yes, the board of directors are those who are charged with governance, but also you have senior management executive, you have auditors, internal auditors, as well as customers, depending on what sort of values do you place when you go and start shopping. Some customers, they prefer even buying products where they feel that the organization values pretty much complement what they believe, So all those part and parcel of governance. Okay. So what is governance? If you read, and you're a very good scholar, there are quite a number of definitions by different scholars depending on the context of the literature. But I've just tried to pick a few. So one of them from Institute of Governance Canada, in terms of the people that you're working with. It involves more organizations that are involved in the business activities. So a simple definition from OECD, a system by which business organizations are directed and controlled. Because corporate governance is more about, steering a ship, providing direction, and why. The list can be so long, but I just picked a few things in terms of promoting leadership. As I said, you're steering the ship. You provide direction more than even a control, if you ask me, in my views. Protect shareholders' rights because of separation of business or owner-manager, problems. So you separate ownership from business. And therefore, those owners, their interest still needs to be protected because they're not involved in day-to-day running of organizations. Although nowadays, people are challenging that you have a board of directors, but sometimes it's very difficult to understand whose interest are they protecting. Is it their interest, given that you don't see the independence between them and management, or are they there for the interest of the owners of business? But it also encourages investment. Nobody wants to invest in a company that has poor governance. So regardless of the laws and regulations, people are unwilling to believe that, corporate governance risk has actually been eliminated or reduced because we still continue to hear about scandals and failures. Very recent one is the Toshiba one. You heard the chairman was ousted by the vote of non-confidence, more than 50% recently. In fact, it was in June 2021. Then Steenhoff, South Africa, that was more in terms of accounting, fraudulent accounting practices. Same with Carillion, those were aggressive accounting practices, and Imperial Bank. Sometimes when you tell people these accounting practices, when you're aggressive, try to paint a different picture, it may result to corporate failure. They're very hard to believe, but we have seen, the likes of Imperial Bank in Kenya. That was also a very recent one. So before we ask ourselves why corporate governance fails, I thought we could just go through some of its public knowledge. So I'm not giving anything by virtue of my position, but these are things that even you can try and get that information because it's publicly available. So let's see some of the failures of very big companies. And one of them is Wells Fargo. This is a bank, and it is one of the 4 large banks in America. So what happened? Do we have bankers here? We have bankers? Anybody from a financial institution? Okay. But sometimes, because of aggressive selling, not necessarily financial institution, but even in other industries, you set targets. And it's very good to set targets, sales targets. So what happens to Wells Fargo, and they came to admit subsequently that the sales targets were quite, aggressive. There was so much pressure that was put on employees to cross-sell, kuleta wateja, kuongeza biashara kwa wale existing customers. So what used to happen, instead of just speaking to customers, convincing them to give them additional business, bankers like to say you add the size of your wallet. So they used to open accounts without the knowledge of existing customers. So you find you open accounts, various accounts, and somebody will show that they've actually met the cross-selling target, but those were fictitious accounts. So in 2016, it was noted about 2 million fake accounts were opened, but actually, in subsequent years, the bank itself, through its own internal mechanism and investigation, found that about 3.5 million fake accounts were actually opened. So the Federal Reserve actually, in 2018, prohibited Wells Fargo from growing its asset beyond that level. Why? So you can see good performance, but it was not a real picture. And you can clearly see what happened to their stock price. Let me show this a point. So the Wells Fargo line is down there from 2016 to 2021. They were negative in terms of stock prices. When it comes to active capital markets or stock exchange, za wenzetu huko ziko very active. Scandal today, overnight, share prices have gone down significantly. So maybe you are asking yourself, what was the cause of that corporate governance failure? We can discuss later. The second one is the Wirecard one, that is a fintech company. We talk about fintech nowadays. So that was also 2020. That's what I'm saying. These examples are 21st century corporate governance failures. And these are not small companies, they are big companies, well established with controls and procedures. But things didn't work. So that company was founded in 1999. And in 2002, when it was struggling, Marcus Brown, he was a former KPMG consultant, put in some capital and became the CEO. Little did he know that there was some aggressive accounting. And what seems to be assets were not even existing assets. So the company collapsed in June 2020, and investors lost billions, And the parallel scandal is that everybody else ignored the early warning signs that the company was going under. So the CEO was arrested. I remember this is a guy who also kept in his capital. So for those who knows the story about Enron, and I mentioned about Enron before, for Germans, this is called the Enron of Germany, given the magnitude, The company was so big. So the stock, which was once traded at 191 euros, now recently it went down to 0.43 euros in terms of share prices. So such things can happen. And that's why we should not ignore corporate governance. So now let's go to Japan, Kobe Steel. Kobe Steel was very funny. In 2017, in fact, they admitted that they falsified data about the quality of their products. And some of those products were used not by small companies. The likes of Toyota purchased, those are their customers. Honda, Subaru, even the Central Japan Railway Company. In fact, they found about 310 parts, though included in one of their bullet train. So they did not meet the standards. So that scandal, again, it led to resignation of CEO. But the reason, the company emphasized on profitability, but also there was inadequate corporate governance. Volkswagen. You see some of these names? So what about these small companies, of ours, if something goes the other side? So in 2015, last their plant in the US, the US Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, discovered that Volkswagen has installed illegal software devices in the diesel cars. So these devices could only work at the emission testing, you know. But after emission testing, and they could just control the emission. After emission testing, the level of nitric oxide just goes, you know, beyond what they expected to emit. So actually, this allowed the vehicle's output of nitric oxide to conform with the US standards at the time of testing. But the vehicles were actually emitting 40 times more nitric oxide when driving on the road. And what happened? Volkswagen had installed about 11 million defeat softwares, devices. And it is said 500,000 of those, they're actually in US. And those vehicles, globally, maybe they also came to this part of the world. And that costed the company. If it wasn't Volkswagen, if it was another company, there wouldn't be Volkswagen today. So if you look at the total amount, about 33 billion US dollar, taking into account the fines, financial settlements, and repurchase cost. And again, look at how, you know, from that graph, investors' reaction to Volkswagen emission saga. Investors, they don't joke when you don't have good corporate governance conduct. Closer to home, Nakumatt. It expanded from mattress shop. For those who have been in Kenya, they know Nakuru, to having branches across Kenya and East Africa. You know, about 60 retail outlets across East Africa. But they started closing them. I think in 2018 they remained 6, but eventually those 6 were also sold to neighbors. And what's the reason? Matters of corporate governance. You know, directors were issued loans, no interest. So that is, again, due to weak governance structures in the family businesses. Okay? At that point, why do you think corporate governance fails? Why? Of course, number one, unethical behavior. We said immoral behaviors is the main contributor. You know, in fact, one of the very famous fiction novelist author, he said, you know, when you talk about corporate governance, it's never about laws, but it's about the personal qualities of those who govern. Personal qualities of those who govern. And that's why it's very good, before you just move on to say, who do I need in my board? Maybe you just appoint friends or people that are very close to you. It's very good to do some vetting. Because it's not about the laws. You know, these laws were being kept, but it's about the people that actually execute the laws. So it's about the personal qualities of those who are charged with governance. But another issue, knowledge in the financial reporting by those charged with governance is very crucial. Not all business owners, they have that knowledge. And in fact, even if they do, they don't exercise governance. Because of good governance principles, the owners have been separated from running the business. So who do you keep? Because some of these aggressive accounting, if you have, again, those who are charged with governance, but none of them has even accounting knowledge, you know, things can just be passed just like that. And that is the most common causes of those corporate failures. As you can see from the examples, it was more about fraudulent financial reporting. And that goes with sometimes compensation schemes, where compensation pretty much depends on performance. Is good because that you promote, you know, good performance. But if it's too aggressive, again, people want to get their bonuses, and therefore they don't care much whether what they're showing is real or not. Ineffective governance mechanism, for example, lack of board committees. You know, the board deals with quite a number of issues, setting up the policies, develop a strategy in collaboration with management, and you may tend to realize that there are certain aspects like risk management, you know, financial reporting that they cannot concentrate in a full board. And therefore you need specific committees, zile kamati ndogo ndogo. Hata bungeni kuna kamati, Public Accounting Committee, si ndio? Kuna kamati nyingi nyingi. So those committees actually add to the efficiency and effectiveness when it comes to governance. And therefore they are very critical. Especially when you grow, you can't just continue with one body doing everything, because in real sense they want to do everything. Another reason is non-independent board members and audit committee members. And this is why when I started saying sometimes you wonder, who do they represent? You know, because they're not independent from management. And that's why you need non-executive directors. Those who are not involved with day-to-day running of the company. Because if you have an executive director, pretty much they'll be defensive to defend their performance, to defend what they did. But you have somebody independent from outside, they can challenge and ask the relevant questions. Intentional misleading of the board by management to protect themselves, you know, after bypassing internal controls. That happens quite a lot. In fact, in certain boards, you may find they call themselves very aggressive or arrogant CEOs, domineering CEOs. And you wonder now, who is the board chair here? Is it the CEO or the chairman of the board? Si ndio? Wakati mwingine anataka chairman ndio amwambie CEO ndio amwambie chairman kitu cha kufanya. And when you talk about independence, maybe I need to mention something. It's good to be independent, objectively, but also somebody told me, even in your pocket, because that's where things go wrong. Are you independent enough in your pocket? Au kuna wale board members, unataka management ya kutafutie transport, hakupe padie mzuri. So independent in mind, but also in your pocket. Underqualified board members. So corporate governance is the ability to take responsibility by their demonstration and as well as the people. As well as the people. So when you have incompetent board members, you're doomed to failure. And that's why I say when you try and pick people to be on your board, don't just do it because of friendship or closeness. And sometimes you wonder, you know, because management, they play a big part in choosing who should be on their board. So in doing that, objectivity can be compromised. Inconsistent distribution of duties and responsibilities. You have an auditor, but you put an auditor in compensation committee. You remember I talked about, you know, those bodies that you need to have committees, especially when the size of organization, you know, increases over time. You can't just do everything within the main board. So you need separate committees. Now, you have an auditor, the auditor sits in compensation committee. Then you have an IT personnel, the IT personnel sits in the audit committee. Now, when it comes to financial reporting by those charged with governance, the IT personnel cannot give you the value in the audit committee. And likewise, that auditor would have been better deployed in the audit committee. So putting the right people in the right place and allocating the right responsibilities. Inefficiency of internal audit. You know, this has been challenged most of the time. You find an organization has an internal audit, but the way things happen, the internal auditor is part and parcel of management. especially sometimes even when we go for external audit, they tend to limit the issue that external audit should report. And you wonder, why are you also becoming so defensive? And yet we're supposed to be in one team. I'm looking at it from an external angle, but we're looking at it from an internal angle. And there comes the issue of independence. Who appraises the internal auditor? Influencing external auditors to express an audit opinion inconsistent with the reality. And sometimes it's a bit challenging. In the quest of maintaining relationship and maintaining a client, the client now can even decide, what they need to be reported. And that's why your choice of the right auditors also is very important and very crucial. When you bring an auditor who is your friend, okay. Fraud and corruption we have seen. So fraud, misappropriation of assets, but also fraudulent financial reporting. That is what kills most of the companies. Sometimes I pity bankers. Because when somebody goes to ask for a loan, oh my goodness, they come with different projections. And you wonder, how did you pass this loan in the first place? Because from day one, when you're underwriting a loan, clearly this loan was not going to perform. Because the financial statement that somebody presented to the bank, they're very different from what they send to TRI and from what they give to auditors. And sometimes bankers, they even just, accept some management account sort of projections and not, audited information. No enough time is given to governance for strategy discussions. As I said, the board is responsible to develop strategy for the company to be able to meet its objective as well as missions. Now, they don't do it alone, they do it in collaboration with management. Pretty much the groundwork is done by management, and then the strategy is presented to the board. But when the strategy goes to the board, it's not a ticking the box exercise. But most of the time, you see it as a ticking the box exercise. Sometimes I keep telling people, you better say no to a board membership position, as opposed to just accept something that you're not going to be responsible. Because remember, corporate governance is about ability to take responsibility by the administration as well as by the people. Are you willing to spend your time? And sometimes management does it deliberately because they give to the board strategy 3 days before the meeting. Will you be able even to grasp anything as far as the strategy? And we find this is 5 years organization strategy. It needs time. You rather say no, we need enough time, cancel the meeting. Insufficient attention paid to risk management. I spoke about this, and this is going to be made possible when you have the relevant risk committees. So from regulatory point of view, when I said governance can also come from external mechanism, you find for our case, for example, BOT requires, banks to have a risk committee. There's an audit committee, but there's also credit and risk committee because they know the importance of risk. How do you identify whether you have a measurement mechanism, whether you have monitoring mechanism and controls as well as when it comes to risk management. So we saw the scandals, but there was also another corporate governance scandal for BP, the oil rig explosion. If you look at that, you may say it was just an accident because there was an explosion. And that resulted to oil, to the Mexican Gulf. But somebody says it's not about accident. It's poor risk management. Where were they? Something must have gone wrong as far as risk management is concerned for that explosion to have happened. So in short, there are no excuses when it comes to corporate governance matters. In terms of how the world reacted to the failures, we spoke about the Enron, and the Enron caused a lot of pains in boardrooms, especially for those public companies with association with the US, because that gave rise to Sarbanes-Oxley. And you see that there's a lot of financial auditing regulations that came along due to corporate governance failures. But also, environmental regulators are putting increasing pressure. As we said, nowadays corporate governance is not about protecting the interest of the owners or shareholders, but protecting the interest of public at large, society, environment. So Volkswagen emission scandal and BP 2010 disaster, where an explosion at the oil rig resulted in 4.9 barrels of oil spilling into the ocean. As I said, the other one you can say it was an accident, but it was never accepted as an accident. They were fined because of poor risk management. So risk management is also very, very crucial. So for you to thrive, corporate governance is very crucial. We have seen it does not matter. It can be even a company that is 50 years old, but it can go under, within a day, within a few days. Where is Enron today? It's pity to know that this was the largest energy company in the world. Where is Nakumat today? Where is Imperial Bank today? The list can go. Yeah. So board should be given enough time for strategy discussion. As I said, if the strategy proposal arrive in the near finished state in the boardroom, you should just push back. And it's possible to push back. Okay. And I think that is it.
Praise God. Thank you so much, Salome, for taking us to school, because some of us were in class. How many were in class like me? Yes, we're in class. So sessions like these are important. They help us, they create awareness. Kwa sababu we are looking at future mega billion owners, partners, directors, business owners, board members, all present and future. Kwa hiyo, this is very, very important. Kwa hiyo, just maybe a recap. While she was talking, I was thinking, one thing that actually, for me, it touched, yani megusa pale pale, ni ile kwamba unatafuta marafiki. Kwa hiyo, yani, you know this one, and you know this one, and you know this one. Au ndo wanakuwa kwenye board of directors. Inaweza ikaanza kama utani, lakini if you have una business ndogo, kwa sababu we anticipate to grow, lazima uzingatie the principles. While you have the friends, accountability is going to be very hard, na vitu kama hivyo. Nafikiri kampuni kubwa kama ambazo ninazifahamu mimi, kama Google labda, na hizi kampuni zingine, I do believe they have very, very transparent and very strict, I think she can tell us, governance. Yani ni it goes by the law. Whether we've seen the Bill Gates, the likes of Jeff Bezos stepping down and leaving it, and the company growing and going, sasa unashika tu, you don't want to leave kwa sababu unajua tena, and then it fails. So tumedaka vitu vingi. So I want to just take us through a session of questions and answers. She's given us very many pointers of examples and why corporate governance or administrative, as she said it, taking responsibility in the administration of businesses, taking accountability, kwa nini inakosekana. Kulingana na scope yetu ambao na experiences zetu tulizonazo, we can share. You don't have to share at a bigger person. You know, we had a very big person standing here. This person has traveled the world. This person has talked to CEOs and CEOs. This person has made decisions. She's the best of the best in the country. There are very few. Afrika tawangapi? If you come on Africa, I don't think so. Kwa hiyo, she's speaking at her caliber and her level. So mimi ni mwalimu. Kwa hiyo ninapenda kwamba let's all discuss at our levels and our calibers, our experiences. You can share an experience. You can give a question and answer. For example, maybe I can give another example. My first phone to hold was an Ericsson phone. You guys remember Ericsson, eh? Ipo bado? Lakini haitengenezi simu. Inatengeneza? Hapana. Ipo iliamua kufanya vitu vingine, si ndio hivyo? But not phones. I think they sold to Sony or something like that, and then maybe they want to come back. So why? Kwa nini? Au BlackBerry? BlackBerry ipo? Ipo? Nani ana simu ya BlackBerry? Najua tu kuna kipindi Marekani walidukuliwa, and the only ni Marekani. And the only thing that saved them was watu ambao walikuwa na simu za BlackBerry. Kwa sababu zilikuwa too old and there was no even the hackers could be able to actually navigate through the BlackBerry phones. That's how much they were old-fashioned. Kwa hiyo, but I think BlackBerry also failed to compete. I don't think they're still there. Kwa hiyo na sisi kulingana na Tanzania hapa na East Africa na duniani, na experiences zetu tu binafsi kulingana na what we do. What's your experience as when you play a role, when you've been in the role of management or an observer, unavofanya kazi, unavoangalia kwenye management uliopo as an individual business or lakini pia kama umeajiriwa, just wewe experience yako unafikiria ni nini ukiangalia. Lakini pia if you have questions, huu ni muda ambao unaweza kauliza swali. So I'm just here to moderate. Sawa, let's get it going. Nishuke chini. Yes. Karibu sana David. Okay.
Bwana Yesu asifiwe.
Amen.
Mimi nina swali. Yes. Kwenye swala la corporate governance. Ni swali lenye two options, yani the world is changing and it's moving very fast. Haraka sana. Kuliko hata hizi corporate governance zinaweza zika catch up. Mfano as a startup, unaweza kuwa na kampuni ndogo, unataka ukue, you have to catch up with the current market, you have to beat the current market leaders, and you have to solidify your position in the market. Na ili kufanya hivyo, you have to change very fast. Like before you know it, you have to go digital. I think kwa mfano Tanzania ni issue ambazo mabenki sasa hivi wanahangaika nazo. Ni kwamba digital wallets zimekuwa zinakuja kwa haraka sana. Ilikuja M-Pesa, sasa hivi everyone is using M-Pesa, Airtel Money, Halo Pesa, Tigo Pesa, Easy Money. And the banks were nowhere with the technology, lakini sasa hivi wanataka waingie tena kwenye hili soko la digital wallets. And kwa hiyo hizi technologies zina move very fast. how would you advise or how would you choose your corporate governance in a way ambayo inaweza ika-fasten ile process in a way to cope up with these changes? Even from a technological point. The other thing is the labor force is becoming very young. Very, very young. Wengi wanaoajiriwa ni watu wadogo wadogo tu. Mostly hata ukiangalia makampuni makubwa, average age ya kuajiriwa ni 26, 27, sometimes 30s, mid 30s ndo waajiriwa wengi. Kwa we are speaking of people ambao they're not really experienced kivile. They might be experienced in one way, lakini they're not that experienced. Now, that's what most companies have. How do you facilitate hii progress iwe very fast kwa watu ambao nipo wapo very inexperienced, in a way kwamba the company moves as one? And the last part of my question is, easy changes are not only technological and labor force. Kuna human rights changes, vitu kama LGBTQ rights, vitu kama gender equality, vitu kama all of these human rights issues ambazo zinaingilia au process nzima ya kwenye recruit talent. So as an institution, let's say as a startup, you need your corporate governance to stay in a place to deal with all of these issues ambazo zinakuja very fast. Technological, young staff, and as well easy rights issues. You have to find your foundation, catch up with the market, and find your position. What would you advise to a young startup when you find the proper corporate governance strategy to keep up with the current trends ambazo zina move very, very fast?
Thank you so much, David. Should we take like maybe 3-5 questions and then we can continue? Yes. Karibu. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is
Karibu.
Lucas Mahumbi. I have 2 questions. When you were mentioning the causes for failures, you mentioned about having body and body committees. For small companies like sole proprietor, partnership, having the body and the body committees involve people, and you have to pay them. How does this work for small companies, sole proprietor and partnership? That's the first question. The second question is on the causes of another causes for corporate failure. You mentioned about management misreading the board. How should the board ensure the accuracy of the information coming from the management? Thank you.
Asante sana, Lucas. Yes, we can take more questions. Yes, karibuni.
Asante. Naitwa Maenda. Mimi nina swali kidogo kwa madam. Nina uzoefu wa kampuni fulani hapa mjini. Naomba nisizitaje sababu ni marafiki zangu. Zina miaka 20. Hawana board, hakuna cha nini wala nini. Yeye ni mkurugenzi, ni mhasibu, ni administrator. The guy is everything. Labda kwa upande mwingine tusaidie, na wanazidi kukua kila siku. They are getting rich and rich.
Thank you so much. Yes, there's a question right here.
Okay, Pahatula, this question is very relevant and actually it's the reality. Okay, thank you very much, presenter, for your presentation, quite insightful. Actually, I have 2 questions, and my first question is, when you were mentioning the factors that contribute to corporate governance failure, you had quite a list but I was wondering how political factors and operating context would contribute to most of corporate governance failures. Because actually most businesses do not operate on an island. They operate generally, basically on the laws that are governing the operations, but also the political and, yes, the political context most of the times. And also the second part of my question is, I'm aware of the fact that most of the businesses, most of business owners, first of all, men, most of them, and also the secretariat and the board, the composition of that is mostly men. So I was wondering, in line with your experience, do you find that those few businesses that are maybe owned by women or the boards of directors are composed of a fair number of men and women, do you find any difference in terms of their corporate governance and whether would advise on the need for ensuring equal representation of men and women in the secretariats and the board of directors, and how that would actually contribute to the improvement of corporate governance? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Should we have some answers to the questions before we proceed? So we have some questions. Number one question. We have a very dynamic world that is moving very fast. Things are changing from digital to different technologies, emerging technologies. So small startups failing to catch up. So how can corporate governance be able to assist in terms of strategies? What can they do? Then we have, Sam, we have a question on human rights changes. How does this affect corporate governance? And how can they still startups, how can they use this? Then the young labor force, very inexperienced, they jump into the businesses, markets. How can you assist them? They're mingling with the big fish and maybe lack of knowing how to frame policies and vitu kama hivyo. What should they do so that they can compete? And then we have a question on management misleading the board. What should they do so that they can be able to catch that? And then also the same from Lucas, we have sole proprietorship versus partnership. Can you touch on that? Right, Lucas? Yes. And then we have a very interesting question of companies that it looks like corporate governance is not failing, or they don't even have it, but they're still thriving and they're doing well with only one person doing everything from HR to publicity to accounting to auditing to sales. How can we do that? I mean, what's the secret behind? And then we have another question on political factors. Are they or are they not a factor to corporate governance failure? And then we have the last question on gender balance. What's your assessment? Does it influence corporate governance failures or not? Thank you so much. Sana.
Thank you, Helen. Okay. I've listed them. Kama nisahau utanikumbusha. I think la kwanza, changes. How do you cope with the changes? You also need to change. As simple as that. If you don't innovate, you can't remain in the business. So Helen was talking about, what phone is that again? BlackBerry. So the failure, they failed to respond to customer preferences. You don't innovate when it comes to technology, then you can't survive. Now, for a startup, I'm not sure whether you were there in the last session. Prosper spoke very well about it. First step first. If you're starting today, to be honest, it's very unrealistic for you to start with a board of directors because your challenges are very different. You get it? When you talk about corporate governance, in a mindset, you need to have that mindset of corporate. So, and I think he told us the journey, that now they have a board, but they did not start with a board, because the challenges are quite many. You've got financial challenges, you've got, capital challenges, you've got customers challenges, so the board cannot come first. You talked about employment, waajiriwa wengi ni vijana. I think it's good to have a mix. Sasa kwa kampuni, kwa mfano kama sisi tunajiri vijana, we hardly recruit experienced hires. Kila mwaka tunajiri fresh graduates. Lakini kwa kampuni kama za kwetu, we have mechanism to train them. Wanapitia training mbalimbali na unawapa responsibility, commensurate to their capabilities. Kwa hivyo hata wewe kama organization, huwezi tu ukawa na vijana peke yake, au kwenye bodi yako ukawa na vijana. It's good kuwa na diversity. Sasa diversity sio gender peke yake, hata age. Na inaenda beyond age, ethnicity. Ni watu wa aina moja tu una accountant peke yake kwenye bodi yako, au una watu wa IT peke yake kwenye bodi yako. Unaona? Swali lako lingine, sitagusa LGBT, naomba nisiguse hapo. Nitagusa upande wa gender, kama you are listed entities, na vingine vinaenda na group policies, kwamba utalazimika pia kuwa na diversity kwenye board. Unaona? Na siku hizi kwenye mabodi mengi ni mandatory at least kuwe na mwanamke. Now at that point labda nijibu na swali lile lingine. Yes, there is a difference. The way women say things, sio kama wanaume. Utaona mambo mengi tu. And there is value addition. If you are advocating for women to be on the board, yes, there is value addition. Ni kweli bado wako wachache kwenye bodi nyingi. Unaweza kukuta mwanamke ni mmoja, wawili, watatu. Lakini contribution from a female board member is quite valuable. Even from an efficiency point of view. Kuna statistics pia zinaonyesha CEOs wanawake na wanaume, efficiency, performance, profitability. So kama tunakutana kwenye zile forums za kuadvocate, I'll tell you there so many advantages, but maybe not, this is not the forum. Swali lingine lilikuja kwenye upande wa small companies. Nafikiri nimelijibu niliposema kwamba the challenges of startup, they are very different. You better be realistic. Unaanza biashara leo utafikiria board of directors. Hapana, ni kitu kinaenda na stages. Unapo grow, then you need those mechanisms. Kwa sababu ukianza peke yako, pretty much you can check everything. Lakini biashara ikikua leo, you can't be the accountant. You can't check risk. You can't check IT. You cannot be that multi-skilled. You can be multi-skilled, but you cannot have time for each and everything. Who will do marketing? Who would actually exercise the check and balances? Unahitaji mtu mwingine wa kukusaidia. Kwa hiyo unavyo expand, unajua unapoanza, unaweza kuwa wewe mwenyewe, you run the show. Na most businesses zimeanza hivyo. Most of these large corporations zimeanza kama family businesses. Lakini for a family business to graduate from being a family business to a corporation, to a corporate, things have to happen. Sasa unakuwa na hizi mechanism, mifumo, controls, unakuwa na board, lakini huwezi kuanza siku moja tu kwamba ukasema una board of directors, hapana. Sasa kuna swali la kaka pale kwamba kuna anazijua kama 20 hivi, yeye peke yake ndio zipo. Unaweza ukaona zinakuwa. Lakini mimi pia nina interest na family businesses. Nyingi zinakuwa the pace that they should not have been growing at that pace. Wanajizuia kukua kwa spidi kubwa tu sana kwa sababu wanashikilia kila kitu. Kuna mmoja waandiki cheki mpaka director mwenyewe owner hawepo. Director anaweza kukimbizana na mabenki anatafuta, kwa hiyo yeye mwenyewe hawepo. Lakini you can see, unajua kukua, I don't want to talk about it. Unachokiona ndani na unachokiona nje ni vitu tofauti kabisa. Kwa hiyo pesi unaofikiri kwamba wanakuwa sana, ongeza kukua zaidi. Nilizungumzia kwa Nakumatt. Kuna mtu alikuwa amini kwamba walikuwa wanakuwa. Si ndio walikuwa wanakuwa? Lakini kama huja change ukaenda kwenye proper governance structures, somehow somewhere you will fail. Si ndio? Sasa huko walifika na kumati. Lakini hazikukaa sana. And they know business. That family, the shrewd business people, ni watu ambao they really know business. But when you expand, you can't be doing the same things the same way you used to do. Kwa sababu unaposema innovation, unaposema una systems, huna watu wa IT, wewe utafanyaje? Wakukushauri. Dada aliuliza kwa habari ya political factors. Yes, political factors can be one of the reasons for why corporate governance fails. You talk about policies. Kumbuka nimezungumza habari ya corporate governance being participatory. So you set up a policy without involving stakeholders. Some of these policies hinder businesses. You know, some of the laws and regulations. So yes, political factors can also be one of the factors in terms of why corporate governance fails.
Okay, let's clap more, please. Yeah. Yes. I was standing here because I believe we have more questions. So we have a question right there. Karibu sana. Oh, okay. Yeah, we welcome experiences. Yes.
Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Naitwa Lawrence Chuma. Mimi ni consultant, management na legal issues. Mambo mawili au matatu ambayo. Kwanza hongera sana dada Salome. Nafikiri umetendea haki. Topic umezungumza kwa experience. Wewe ni kati ya watu wachache ambao wanakubali sana. Lakini watu wenye experience katika maeneo kama hayo. Kwa hiyo umeongea zaidi kutokana na uzoefu. Mimi naomba niongee vitu vichache sana. Sababu naamini hapa tuna corporate boards wengi, either sasa hivi au baadaye, lakini ni vizuri sana. Sasa mara nyingi huwa ninafanya consultant na consult makampuni na organization mbalimbali sana. Na kati ya mambo ambayo ameyazungumzia vizuri sana dada Salome yako humu. Mimi nitaongelea vitu vichache sana. Point kama 2-3. Ya kwanza aligusia kuhusiana na nafikiri ni incompetence ya board members. Na nafikiri dada Helen aligusia kidogo akasema ile kuchukua watu kishikaji. Yaani unamwangalia mtu unasema nafikiri unaweza kukaa kwenye board wewe unafaa kwa sababu yani bila kujua tu uwezo wake, na hii ndio imekuwa sana kwenye board nyingi. Kwa hiyo unakuta mtu anachaguliwa sio kwa sababu ya uwezo. Na mara nyingi hii nimekuwa naiona kwenye makampuni mengi na unawashauri kwamba kuna watu ambao kupati ule mtiririko walikujaje kwenye board. Yaani ukiuliza kama niona kampuni au watu wengine kwamba mliwezaje kuwapata hawa? Yaani hakuna namna ambavyo naweza kuelezea. Utasikia tu kwamba nilikuwepo. Nikakaa nikaona kwamba hii naweza nikafanya kitu hapa. Kwa hiyo yupo, lakini huwezi ukapata ule mchakato. Ni makampuni machache sana ambayo yanaweza kuelezea wana ile recruiting ile strategy au namna ya kuwapata watu ambao wanaweza wakasefu kwenye board. Kwa hiyo hii ni moja kati ya changamoto, namna ya kuwapata watu ambao watakuwepo kwenye boards. Na sio hivyo, amegusia vizuri da Salome. Watu ambao wana uzoefu, watu ambao wana ujuzi, watu ambao sio tu experience lakini pia wana maarifa. Na mara nyingi unaweza kukuta mtu kwenye board lakini kwa kweli uwezo wao unahojika. Kwa hiyo hizi ni changamoto ambazo nimeziona. Lakini changamoto nyingine ambayo nimeiona katika experience yangu ni ile labda kama nikizungumzia hapa ni kwamba management au CEO au waanzilishi wengi wa makampuni hawapendi usumbufu. Kwa hiyo pengine wanachagua watu ambao hawata wasumbua. Mara nyingi ndio iko hivi. Kwamba unakuta bodi inauliza maswali mengi sana. Na huyu jamaa hataki mambo mengi au management haitaki maswali mengi. Kwa hiyo wakati mwingine inabidi wachague watu ambao wanajua hivi tukimchagua huyu hata tusumbua kweli. Nazungumza kwa sababu kuna watu ambao unawafahamu, wengine mpaka watengenezewa zengwe kwenye baadhi ya bodi kubwa wakaondoka. Sasa sisi tulivyohoji kama consultants tukasema kwa nini fulani na fulani alitoka, kwa sababu pengo lake linaonekana. Wanakuambia tu kifupi tu kwamba nafikiri muda wake ulifika. Lakini huwezi ukaona mikataba ambayo inaonyesha kwamba muda ulifika. Kwa hiyo unajua tu kwamba kuna lolote, lakini they are very very key people in organizational capacity ambao walikuwa wanaweza kufanya vitu. Kwa hiyo nafikiri hii ni changamoto kubwa sana. Lakini tatizo lingine ambalo nimeliona katika experience ambayo nimekuwa naifanya, tunasemaga namna ambavyo watu wenyewe ambao wanachukua nafasi hizo, labda nizungumzie vizuri kwamba iwapo kesho kutwa utakuwa appointed, labda umekuwa appointed au kuna namna ambavyo umependekezwa kuingia kwenye board, usiingie kama huko tayari. La kwanza, nalizungumza vizuri sana kwa sababu wengine na pia tutakutana huko. Lakini la pili, kama unalijua huna maarifa na kitu fulani na sehemu yenyewe, usiingie. Kuna baadhi ya boards ambazo zinahitaji capacity yako. Yaani huwa nazungumza kwa mfano mimi ukiniweka kwenye bodi ya madawa, organization ambayo tunashirika na madawa, naweza nikasaidia kwenye organizational development. Lakini naweza nisijue zaidi kuhusiana na, nisiwe mtaalamu sana katika masuala haya. Kwa hiyo nafikiri ni vizuri pia uwe unajua na wewe interest yako ipo wapi na uwezo wako uwe wapi, ili usije ukajikuta kwamba unaongeza tatizo badala ya kupunguza. Lakini sio hivyo tu, kuna wakati inawezekana kabisa ukiangalia marupurupu ya kuwa mwanabodi ni mengi zaidi, kwa hiyo mtu anaamua kwamba niache kule hapo na bwana amenitokea. Kwa hiyo unaamua kuingia. Nafikiri hiyo inaweza ikawa sio nzuri kwako. Kwa hiyo nafikiri kati ya vitu ambavyo nimeviona vingi ni hivyo. Labda ningegusia swala moja kwa sababu ameloya, huwa siogope kuzungumza hili. Kwenye moja ya ambayo dada Salome kuzungumzia masuala ya haki, sisi tunazungumzia. In fact kuna baadhi ya kampuni ambazo moja kati ya masharti ni kuwa na board members wenye tabia hizo ulizozitaja mwanzo. Mlimsikia, si ndivyo? Nizungumzie tena. Kwa hiyo zile katika namna kama hiyo inabidi wakati mwingine mna resort kwenye vision zenu na namna gani ambavyo mnataka. Sasa inawezekana ikawa pengine ni kampuni ambayo imetengenezwa na forces au na watu kutoka nchi mbalimbali, lakini wanataka kwenye ile board wewe kama ni mwanzilishi au nini kuwe kuna watu namna hiyo. Sasa mara nyingi inabidi uwe makini sana katika namna ya formation ya hiyo kampuni. Na je, unakubaliana baadhi ya masharti hapo? Kwa nafikiri some of the things na vizungumza experience kwa sababu vipo nimeviona. Kwa hiyo ni vizuri kujua kuanzia mwanzo ni aina gani ya board members ambao unataka kuwa nao, na ni aina gani ya masharti ambayo umepewa, na iwapo unakubaliana na yale masharti ya kuanzisha, kama ni kampuni ambayo inatakiwa ianzishwe na watu kutoka nchi mbalimbali au pengine nchi moja ambayo inataka kampuni fulani cooperate katika maeneo kama haya. Kwa hiyo kama huwezi kuanzia mapema, unawaambia kabisa kwamba mimi sitoweza kuwa part ya hiyo. Lakini kama hiyo values ambayo unahisi kwamba it's okay, hamna tatizo. Kwa hiyo nafikiri hayo mambo mwisho wa siku amani yako ndio inabidi fanyeje? Iamue. Nafikiri kwa hiyo nitaka nishie kidogo kuhusiana na mambo, kuna mambo mengi sana, lakini nafikiri kama tunataka kweli, kakaangu amezungumzia vizuri pale, reality ya board nyingi, organizations nyingi au kampuni nyingi ni kwamba kuna bodi ambayo inaweza ikawa kama picha lakini haifanyi kama vile ambavyo itakiwa ifanye. Au ni watu wameandika majina kwenye kabisa, unakuta kabisa kuna hapa na hapa na hapa, lakini wale watu hawapo. Alafu unakuta yule CEO anafanya kila kitu kama alivyozungumza. Hizi tumeziona nyingi sana zipo. Hasa kwenye NGOs nafikiri. NGOs na hizi wanahitaji social nini. Unakuta ziko nyingi sana, yani ni picha pale mpaka picha kila kitu. Lakini ukimpigia yule board member kumuuliza, "Aisi sasa wewe wajibu wako ni upi?" Si kwenye vikao. Unaniuliza mambo ambayo yako wazi. Lakini ukweli they are not active. Na iko hivyo. Lakini kati ya vitu ambavyo vinatupaga shida sana sisi, na niseme makampuni yetu mengi, we do not grow kwa sababu hatutaki watu ambao wanaweza kutuonyesha vitu au kutusimamia katika baadhi ya maeneo. Kuna watu naturally wasiposimamiwa wanafanya vitu kama kawaida, na kuna watu siku zote wakisimamiwa wanafanya vitu. Kwa hiyo ukiwa na bodi ambayo inajitambua bodi ambayo ni responsible, bodi ambayo inaelewa wajibu wake kwa maana hiyo, lakini bodi ambayo inajua inatakiwa ufanye nini, hiyo kampuni lazima ipae, kwa sababu kila mwanabodi atakuwa na kitu cha kufanyaje, cha kuchangia kwenye kampuni. Nawashukuru sana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I have a small contribution, maybe just 1 minute. The first thing, I would also like to add to what Lawrence just mentioned about the human rights and this other direction. Jamani, haya mambo yapo, and let's not shy away talk about them. Eh? But when it comes to the direction of the organization and where you want to go, kuna kitu kikubwa sana ambayo ina matter ni muscles za hiyo organization. We all know world vision, and probably kuna watu wanafanya world vision hapa. Sitaenda mbali sana. Tunaelewa msimamo wao, and we do understand jinsi walivyosimama towards not welcoming this other direction, na jinsi ilivyo cost. Kama ufahamu basi, it's public knowledge. Google, usome. But World Vision has stood, wameendelea. They have forged ahead, and they are not barged in kusema kwamba tunakaribisha hivi vitu, kwa sababu wamekuwa na huo msimamo. Do you have the muscles? Organization yako inayo muscles ya kusimama. Okay? Sasa kitu kingine kidogo about that I wanted to add nilikuwa naangalia hapa the guiding principles on effective governance. When we talk about leadership, ethics, integrity, stewardship, accountability, effectiveness, roles and responsibility pamoja na participation, these they come at a personal level. So moving forward, tunatakiwa tufanye nini? If we are grooming people, how can we groom leaders? Sisi wenyewe. How can we cultivate ethics, integrity? It goes further kuanzia jinsi ambavyo tunalea watoto, kwa sababu hao ndio future board members. Tunavyofundisha wanafunzi mavyuoni, jinsi gani tunafanya wa inculcate hivi vitu katika makuzi yao na jinsi wanavyokuwa. Because then solving the mystery, because in the end we do not want governance to fail. We all want to prosper. So how can we prosper? Nafikiri tukiweza instill these values right at a personal level, that's when we excel. Thank you very much.
Yes, karibu sana. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just take 1 minute to make a quick contribution to what a learned individual just mentioned. And this is in the context of not diminishing the dreams of people who want to become board members. I know you mentioned something around, being a technocrat, if I may put it in that way, sort of like understanding the business, et cetera, et cetera. I do agree with you on that. But on the other hand, I do believe in having fresh people, fresh minds. I've been in banking for over 16 years. And in our board, we had somebody from the education sector, completely different from banking. We had a diplomat as well, nothing to do with banking. But I can tell you the kind of contribution that they used to bring in, the kind of challenge, the kind of fresh thinking that they used to bring in, it was a real challenge for all of us, within the banking sector. So I thought I should just caution and say that, look, whoever wants to become a board member can become a board member. Create that interest in the organization that you want to become a board member for. Do not be afraid that you're not a banker, that you're not in the education sector or something like that, and therefore you hold yourselves back. We do believe that with your fresh thinking, fresh outlook of things, you can still add value. But fundamental is the fact that you really do need to understand the sector that you want to get yourselves into. So please just, for anybody who's got a dream of becoming a board member, don't be scared that you're not in that particular industry. You can still do it. I just wanted to bring out that caution. Thank you.
Yes, please give Madam Salome.
Because when they've onboard new board members go through training.
So they go through training so that they understand the business. Because you can't be able to contribute if you don't understand, at least the basic understanding in terms of what the business does. So yes, you don't really need to have the specific sectorial knowledge to be a board member. But it's again the responsibility of that company to orient their board members. Kwa hiyo wengi wanapitia orientation. Na hata some of these soft skills, siku hizi bodi nyingi lazima director wale wapya wote wapitie corporate governance training. Yeah. Inasaidia. Nimefurahi alivyokuwa anasema about vision. Moja ya vitu vingine
That's true. Actually, I was. Did you hear the back? Did you hear? Yeah, the principle and the direction of world vision, like the Christianity, how they put it at the center. Yes, maybe that's one of their muscles. I think we've come to the end of the question and answer. You have one more? Director, can we have one more, or are we? The last one, yes. Last one, a very brief last one.
Swali langu ni kwamba sasa kama employee, wafanyakazi au manager au watu ambapo ndani ya organization, unawezaje what's the best approach kwenye kuinfluence the direction of our board members? Speaking from experience, mimi nilibahatika kusoma nje, and kule they are very welcoming kwenye mambo ya new ideas, especially kwenye IT, research, development na vitu kama hivyo. Wanakuwa very welcoming. As a matter of fact, tunaweza approach the person in the highest position kwenye organization, ukaongea naye kuhusu hivi vitu vya IT or technological issues, and they'll be very welcoming. The same can't be said kwa Tanzania. Kwanza approach tu hata mtu wa manager au boss wako, it's very intimidating. Let alone board member. I've had the opportunity to see my boss being roasted in a board meeting. Pia kwa sababu IT personnel kwenye kampuni nyingi bado ni wadogo. We don't have a proper way to know this is how we approach a board member. This is how we talk to a senior management. This is how we influence them to implement certain changes. Kwa inakuwa extremely difficult. As an advice, what's the best approach as an employee in an organization to influence top management, probably even board members, kwenye direction ya IT or any other field or niche to best address your situation?
Okay, I welcome Madam Salome to answer the question, but then also to give us a summary of our question and answer, wind up. Yes. Yes, karibu sana. And then once she's done, she's going to hand over to the director. You want to help her to answer the question? Okay, let me first. Should I get one more question? There's a burning question. Kitu swali nini? Karibu Lucas.
Nashukuru sana. Kwa kweli mimi ni mwanafunzi, napenda kujifunza na napenda pia kupata experience kutoka kwa wengine. Ili kuhakikisha effective of the body, nataka nipate experience. How do you evaluate the body? Na kitu kingine ambacho nilikuwa nataka nipate experience ni kuhusiana na company secretary na body secretary, the CEO or managing director kuwa secretary au independent company kuja kuwa kama secretary, body secretary. Ni best practice ni ipi? The comment on that. Thank you.
Yes, we have these two. Did you catch them? Yes, the evaluation of the board. Do boards get, I also want to know, do they get evaluated? Then we have on how they can influence board members. Or are they supposed to influence board members? I don't know if they're supposed to, but yes. And then then you can hand over to the director. Yes.
I'm glad you have provoked your thoughts, you know, to the point that you want to ask questions again and again. About that, it depends with the organization policy. Where you find a company ambao wanasema open door policy, sio issue. Sasa sijui ni mazingira gani, kwa mazingira tofautiana. Kama unaenda serikalini ni tofauti, ukija huko kwenye private companies ni tofauti. So you need to orient yourself with the culture, organization culture. Lakini sasa hivi for most corporations, most private companies, it's not a big issue. Kwa sababu sisi tuna operate open door policy. Na IT policy strategy is very clear, articulate. Sasa unapokuwa kwenye mazingira mengine, hata kumaddress mtu first name ni issue. Get it? Lakini ukija kwenye private companies, utaita Salome, utaita Zainab Salome, mahali pengine inabidi utumie surname. Kwa hiyo ni kuelewa culture, organization culture. Na nafikiri tunabadilika. We are not close to the West, lakini we are getting there. We are getting there at serikalini. Boards, yes, boards zinakuwa evaluated. Na pengine sio zote, sio makampuni yote yana clear policies kwenye board evaluation of board members. Lakini mengi yanayoenda kwenye good corporate governance, wale board members wao wanakuwa evaluated. Wengine wanafanya annually, wengine wanafanya at the end of the term, like 3 years before they renew, wana evaluate wale members. Na swali lako lingine, which one is the best practice? To have a CEO as a secretary or to have an independent company? Na makampuni mengine yana company secretary. Na huyo ndo anakuwa secretary wa board. Kwa wale wenye CEO kama secretary ni chache, na labda ni taasisi nyingi, labda na serikali ndio nimekuta hilo. Lakini nyingi kwenye good corporate governance, company secretary ndio anakuwa secretary of the board. Sasa kwa wengine ambao hawana structure, especially the startup, huwa wanatoa kwa independent company. Sasa sisi tunafanya secretarial services. Tunakuwa company secretary wa makampuni mbalimbali.
More claps, that is not enough. Nakumbuka mtu alisema, nafikiri was it TDJX, kwamba kama maono yako unaweza ukayabeba wewe peke yako, then ni madogo sana. Nafikiri at some point unavyokuwa, the bigger the vision, it brings in watu wengi zaidi, na hapo ndipo systems, structures za kusupport hayo maono zinapokuwa muhimu zaidi. Kwa hiyo hata zile kampuni zetu za kina Mwangunguru ambazo mwanzo mwisho no board wanaenda, I think it's just a matter of time, au wanajizuia kufika kule ambako labda wangefika kama wangekuwa na mifumo zaidi. Siku zote wanapenda kusema, mimi nakuaga inspired sana na makampuni yale unaenda yameandika since 1922. Sasa mengi nikiangaliaga yale huwa sio ya kina Mwangunguru, mengi nayo yafahamu, sio mengi ni Patel, Singh, sijui na nani hivyo, lakini mengi ya kwetu yanakuwa sio hivyo, kwa sababu nafikiri yanafika mahali hayawezi kwenda zaidi ya muasisi aliyeasisi, na muasisi akifa lazima life, hamna namna, yani inabidi life, kwa sababu the whole company was anchored in just that one man. Kwa hiyo kama you want to build something ambacho utakuwa nacho wewe in your lifetime, then it's okay. Lakini kama unataka kutengeneza kitu ambacho kitakuwepo for generations, a proper corporate governance is unavoidable. Lazima tufike mahali tuwaze hivyo. Usiwe na mahaba sana na ulichokianzisha kiasi kwamba you don't want other people to come in kukusaidia. Amesema hapa wengi ambao tunakuaga waasisi wa hizo kampuni unakuwa na pride fulani. You don't want someone to tell you what to do, kukuquestion kwenye this is my own thing and you think you know better. Lakini watu wengi wanajua vitu vingi kuliko unavyojua. Nilivyoanza kuona kampuni ina take shape inakuwa, nikagundua kuna mambo mengi sana sijui ambao watu wengine wangeniambia. At some point I had a turbulence ambayo ndio ina involve vitu vingi, the government, the nani. Nikagundua sijui. Lakini I met someone who is good into how the government work and how politics work. Nakwambia no, ukienda kwa huyu hawezi kufanya hivi. Huyu atafanya hivi. He knows the game. Nasema so kama alivyosema dada, ndio watu kwenye board kuna saa unahitaji mtu wa namna hiyo tu. Kuna saa unahitaji mtu ambaye anajua lobbying vizuri, awe hapo. Anaweza sio mtu wa tech lakini atakusaidia kwenye mambo mengine mengi. Sasa ile composition inategemea ni unataka kwenda, kampuni yako umedefine vipi, iko tech oriented, unahitaji mtu ambaye ana jicho la tech, iko na unahitaji mtu akukingia kifua tu saa nyingine kwamba akukingia kifua. So the composition itakuwa so diverse kutegemeana na nini tunataka kufanya na kuachieve na kwenda. So tunashukuru sana waliokuwepo kwenye previous session. Tuliongea pia in a very simple term kwa sababu ni kweli huwezi kuwa na board day one labda, lakini definition inatuambia tu ni namna ambavyo taasisi inakuwa organized and directed. It's a system. Kwa hiyo inaweza hata kama niko mimi na mke wangu tunaweza kutengeneza system katika mfumo rahisi, na zile systems zitaendelea kukua na kuwa complex as the business grow as well. Au sio? Has it been helpful? So thank you so much Salome. Thank you for being ready to share what you have. Na tunaamini tutaendelea kubenefit kwenye hiyo hazina more and more. So anytime we need you, tunakuomba uendelee kuwa kama ulivyokuwa leo, kukubali kuja kushare na sisi na tuendelee kujifunza. Amen. Na wewe pia ni kuendelea kukukaribisha anytime we have these sessions. Njoo. Hata bila hamasa kubwa sana, bila jingo nyingi, ukisikia kuna professional gathering, just come. Haibadilishi namna utakavyoelewa. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Hata bila matangazo mengi sana, still nondo uzito wake ni ule ule. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So karibu sana. Nikuchukua kwenye matangazo sasa. I want to appreciate those who are coming for their very first time. If you're here for your very first time in the professional gathering, can I see your hands up? Wow. Wenyeji leo wameenda wapi? Tuna wageni wengi kuliko wenyeji. Karibuni sana. Huko karibu naye naomba nisaidie kumkaribisha. Kama ni mwenyeji zaidi, mkaribishe mgeni aliyeko kwenye karibu nawe. Amen. Lakini pili, nitambue wale ambao sio wana VCCT. Najua wengine ni mara ya kwanza kwenye program, lakini they are members of this church. If you're not a member of this church and you've come in the program today, can I see your hand? Tukukaribisha. Wow. We have wakati tukitoa sadaka. Karibuni sana. Baada ya hapo nitamkaribisha moja kwa moja Pastor Sam, atakuja kutuairishia ibada na kuombea sadaka.
Baba, katika jina la Yesu twaja mbele zako Mfalme. Asante kwa wakati mzuri tumekuwa nao mahali hapa. Asante Bwana kwa ajili ya kile ambacho tumejifunza jioni hii. Ni imani yetu thabiti ya kwamba Mungu mwenye nguvu, kuna board members ambao wanakwenda kufanya maajabu wako mahali hapa. Kuna watu ambao wanakwenda kuchukua kampuni zao, biashara zao na kuzipeleka katika kiwango kingine cha juu kwa sababu ya maarifa ambayo yametolewa mahali hapa. Hatukuja tu Bwana kujaza taarifa katika vichwa, lakini taarifa ambazo zinakwenda kufanya transformation ya vile ambavyo umetupa kufanya katika jina la Yesu Kristo. Baba, asante kwa ajili ya kila mmoja ambaye ameweza kuwapo mahali hapa, na tunakabidhi na sadaka tulizozitoa mikononi mwako Bwana. Umesema tukujaribu kwa kukutolea, tuone kama hautatufungulia hayo madirisha. Bwana, tunakwenda kukuona katika biashara, kazi, maisha yetu ya kila siku, kwa sababu tumekugusa Bwana kupitia sadaka ambazo tumetoa. Asante kwa kuwa utakuwa na kila mmoja aliyepo mahali hapa Bwana anapoondoka, na utamlinda Mungu mwenye nguvu katika jina la Yesu Kristo. Baba, tumeomba na kuamini, na kila mmoja sema amen. Amen. Asanteni kwa ujio wenu. Dada Salome, naomba na mimi pia kwa niaba ya Pastor Huruma nikushukuru. Amen. Nilikutana na mtumishi mmoja, nilikuwa namfahamu, anatoka kanisa kubwa tu. Alikuwa mwenyekiti wa ujenzi wa mradi mkubwa ambao walikuwa nao kwenye kanisa hilo. Nikamuuliza, vipi mnaendeleaje? Akaniambia nakaribia kuhama lile kanisa, kwa sababu baada ya vikao vingi sana pastor alikuja akawaambia Roho Mtakatifu amebadilisha yale maono. Kwa hiyo nilikuwa niko na kusikiliza kwa umakini mkubwa sana hapa, hasa baada ya kukutana na lile jambo. Sijajua kama huko kwenye kujifunza kwenu kuna concept ya Roho Mtakatifu akija akabadilisha governance zinazungumzaje hapo. By the way, tunamshukuru Mungu sana kwa ajili ya VCCT. Mungu ametupa mchungaji ambaye ndio amepioneer maono ya kuwa na kitu kama hiki, na tunashukuru kwamba vitu viko stable. Bwana akubariki, uenende na amani ya Kristo. Amen.